Well, hello everybody, this is dear Mama Sal on a very pretty Thursday morning. Thursday. For those of you who don't know, I don't work on Fridays, so Thursday is my Friday. And it is already 17 degrees here in southern British Columbia, which would make it 63 in American. Another hot one is coming. But not nearly as hot as they tell me it's going to be this weekend. We're expecting, for us, very high temperatures. In fact, record-breaking temperatures apparently, which will be interesting. And for those of us who have lived in Africa or India or any of those sort of fairly hot countries, I think we'd have to say it looks like it'll be touching on summer. And talking about those excessive heats, I'm really sorry to hear how excessive heats is now killing so many people, and yeah, that's, you know, something. If you can imagine being in excessive heat and not have running water or electricity for fans, and then you've got to ask yourself, how do they not die? So, I just want to acknowledge that for a second before I get too excited about the heat. But on the good side, those of us who like the heat, enjoy the heat, it should be a fun weekend. Now, I'm off to the baseball this weekend, or that was the plan. So that's going to be quite exciting, but tonight I'm going out to dinner with some friends of mine. So, it's going to be a busy weekend for me. And the topic of the day. I was asked again by Anne, and I picked up on her two topics because I thought they were both important ones at this time. She asked me about interview techniques. What advice did I have for anybody trying to get a job? And quite honestly, that I could spend probably a week on, but I tried to think, what would I want you to know? All right, the first thing I'd want you to know is that from all my years of interviewing people, try not to take the rejection personally. I know it feels very personal. But sometimes, and more often than you know, they're looking for a particular type of person with a particular type of skill set. In other words, if you send your resume in and it doesn't have these 3 words in it, they probably won't even invite you in for the interview. Now you're saying, so which 3 words? Which 3 words? Tell me the 3 words. No, it's not about that. It depends on what they're looking for. Do you get my drift? So, what a lot of people do today is they pre-screen by certain words that they're looking for. And I know that I certainly, when I was interviewing people and having to go through resumes, I do it with a highlighter. Because what I wanted to make sure is that I got the words that I wanted highlighted. Now the reason for that is, let's say I received 50 resumes. And I obviously had 2 or 3 that I thought were really a good chance of getting this job. Sorry, somebody's desperately trying to get in beside me and I can't go up any further. Anyway, so let's say that I had 2 or 3 that I really liked the look of. But in my mind, I probably had that I really should interview 6. Well, then what I'd look for is, when I went back through the papers, which ones had the most yellow on them? Now, which ones stood out because they had more yellow on them than the rest? And that would be how I would choose the next 4. I wonder if that makes sense. Now, That doesn't mean that you didn't have the right qualifications. It doesn't mean that you didn't have the right experience. It doesn't mean you weren't the right age, the right whatever. It means that what I was looking for didn't come up the way I wanted it to. Got nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with what I'm looking for. Now, that doesn't mean what I'm looking for is necessarily the right answer either. And from my experience. So I hope that makes some sense. But let's talk a little bit about going for an interview. Let's work on the fact that in most cases you're probably up against 5 other people. Let's say that most people will interview 6 to 10 people maybe. And the reason they don't interview more than that is they don't have time. A lot of people pre-screen even more heavily and only interview 2 or 3. So let's say that you've got the right words going for you and you actually get through to the interview stage. I think there's some golden rules here that I don't care how old you are, what job it is, what you're applying for. They're the golden rules. Number 1, do not be late. I cannot tell you the effect that has emotionally on an interviewer. They've blocked off this particular space of time for you, and then you're late, which cuts into the time which makes them late. No. If something happens to you that's unavoidable, like you got caught up in a traffic jam behind an accident or something, then what I would recommend you do is you phone in and tell the interviewer that you have unavoidably got stuck in a traffic jam behind an accident. Would they prefer to reschedule, or should you continue to come in late? Because you will be late. See, that gives the interviewer the choice. And most interviewers, I'd say, would respect the fact that you gave them that choice. Some will say don't bother to come in, period. But you don't want to work for that person anyway, right? Because life happens. But I think the fact that you show the good manners to say, this is what's happening, would you prefer that I cancel or come in late? Or reschedule, rather, or come in late? And quite honestly, if you do it well, you'll probably get a bonus point. Because you show respect and understanding of your boss's time. I don't know too many bosses that don't appreciate that. By the way, if they say, okay, we'll come in after work at 5:30, don't say, oh, I can't do that, because that was your one chance. All right, so now let's move on. So number 1, be respectful of time. In fact, number 1, be respectful on all levels. People ask me, well, should I dress formally or casually? I always say to people, dress the best you can. I don't expect everybody to come in with a Dior or a Armani suit. I do expect them to come in looking clean, professional, and pleased to meet me. And when I say pleased to meet me, you know, if you look like you're having a terrible day and your hair's not done and your clothes are dirty and your shoes aren't clean, or the heel part has come off your shoe, or if you look like you don't look after yourself, you're sure as heck not going to be looking after my business. Now, that might not be fair, but it is the unspoken language. So be aware of that. Be aware that subtle things can make or break your interview. So let's presume that you're on time and that you are dressed as professionally as you can. Have a firm handshake. I don't mean break somebody's bones in their hand. I just don't mean the limp wrist sort of, hello. Have a firm handshake. And if you don't know whether you've got one or not, ask some friends to shake hands with you. I would really recommend that you be very aware of the number of negative words you use. I cannot tell you how many people would come into an interview with me and say things like, well, maybe. And I'd ask a straight question, do you like black or white? And they go, well, sometimes I like black, but sometimes I also like white. Okay, so now I've discovered this person cannot make a decision. It wasn't a trick question, it was just an interested question. Do you prefer black or white? And they were so scared of giving the wrong answer that they went straight down the middle. Now, there are ways of actually answering that don't sound as though you're incapable of making a decision. But I think most people, when they ask you a question, are actually genuinely interested in your opinion. Why? Because they're looking for a fit in their team. Now, if the majority of their team likes white rather than black, that could affect things. I'm using those two words just in terms of a decision-making thing. I don't mean them in any racial way whatsoever, obviously. So now, the other thing that I found is be aware of the job that you're applying for. If you're applying for a job that is, for example, in retail, where you're going to mix with a lot of people, and you're going to mix with a lot of people from different walks of life and different socioeconomic situations, rich people in some cases and not so rich on others, or, people that are struggling. If you're going to mix in a cross-section of people, then you need to be pretty flexible. So when I'm interviewing you, I might ask you all sorts of different questions that will probably sound quite challenging. But really what I'm looking for is how flexible are you in your thinking? Can you sort of jump from one subject to another? Can you adapt? Can you talk about the sort of things that people might want you to talk about? And if you can't, then you're probably not the right fit for this particular store. On the other hand, if I am interviewing you for a dollar store, my needs from you are probably very different. You probably just need to be a really good stacker of shelves. You know what I mean? And be able to work the till well. So I think if you could look at it, you've got to look at the job you're applying for. And that's why when people say to me, oh, Sal, I'm applying for a job, can I use you as a reference? I will say only if you send me information on the job you're applying for. I want to know what they're applying for so I can use the right words, which is why I normally give a very good reference for people and they normally get employed, because I know what words to use. Now, you've heard it said many, many times before, be yourself. And the reason people say that is, if you try to be an upbeat person and you are not normally an upbeat person, it actually shows. If, on the other hand, you're the Energizer Bunny and you try very hard to be really toned down. That can show too. So I think you're safer being who you are to some degree. In other words, when you tone it down, if you're the Energizer Bunny, when you tone it down, don't tone it down to something that's not true to you. Tone it down to your quieter moments. If you are not the Energizer Bunny, if you are, a good imitation of a slug, and then don't try and be an Energizer Bunny, but try and bring a little bit of oomph to what you're saying. I would say the most important thing you can do in an interview is smile. I would say it's really important to do some research on the company, so you can at least ask one industry-related question, or at least be aware that the company is second in its category. You know what I mean? You need to do some research if you can. And luckily today, with all the internet that you have access to, it's very easy to do that. In my day, it wasn't easy to do that. So that's respectful. The other warning I would give you is don't talk too much. If they ask you a question that is answerable by yes or no, answer it with a yes or no, and then say, would you like me to expand on that? Their choice. Either you can carry on talking on it, or you have answered the question. So if they say, have you ever been in a very stressful situation? The actual question asks for a closed answer, yes or no. Now, if they say, have you ever been in a very stressful situation, and if so, give me an example, that calls for you to tell more information. So listen carefully to the questions you get asked. As an interviewer, there's nothing worse than a person who spends 5 minutes answering a simple question. You're wasting my time. I had 10 other questions I needed to ask you, but I'm not going to bother anymore because you don't listen. Make sense? But be who you are, because normally who you are is more than enough. Whether you are the Energizer Bunny or the slug doesn't really matter. Normally who you are is more than enough. People are looking for people like you. I know you think that they're looking for the other sort of person, but so many companies are looking for a person just like you. Now, when I went to interviews, I used to be pretty ballsy, and I used to be pretty confident, to put it mildly. Why? Because I genuinely believed I could do the job. I either had proof of that in my experience, or if what I understood about the job was true, I could do it. I've always said if you're smart enough to talk your way into an interview, you're probably smart enough to do the job. Okay. So the key things: be on time, be as neat and tidy as possible, be clean. I don't presume I have to tell you, don't be chewing gum, or if you're a smoker, for goodness sake, take breath mints before you go in. All those obvious things. Smile. Don't be scared of blank spaces. If they've asked a question and you've answered it, and they don't immediately ask you another question, don't feel you need to carry on talking. It is their job to control the interview, not yours. Now, if that starts to feel uncomfortable, you might want to say, did you need more information on that? Have a good handshake. Watch your body language. The one thing that I have a lot of problem, I teach a lot of people how to go through major interviews to get into med school and things like that. not on the technical side, not on the informational side, but I teach them how to do that from a body language and voice tone point of view. So let's quickly talk about that. Have a voice tone that sounds like you know what you're doing. If you have a little squeaky voice like this all the time, and it's going to drive a lot of people insane. Have a well-modulated voice tone. And if you haven't, start developing one. How do you do that? You practice. If you're in a job that's going to be talking to older people, such as myself, understand that if you talk too fast, you're going to probably not get the job. Why? Not because old people are stupid, because your voice tone, the actual tone of your voice, can be difficult for older people, but if you're doing it rapid fire, really very, very quickly, it's impossible to hear you. A lot of people will tell you keep good eye contact. That doesn't mean stare them down. It means just make sure that you are looking at them and that you look them in the eye, not that you're fidgeting and trying to do all sorts of other things all the time. Okay. So hopefully there's a few pointers that will be helpful. And by the way, they're not just pointers for interviews. I think they're pointers to life. Whenever you meet people. So we'll be talking more about this. This is dear Mama Sal saying thank you for listening. Bye bye for now.